Hello and welcome to another BBA webinar. I'm your host, Peter Sumpton, Marketing Consultant. I'm delighted to be joined today by Mr. Mike Moseley, who is the, let me get this right, it's on the screen, Knowledge Transfer Manager in Construction at Knowledge Transfer Network and an I3P Secretariat. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. It's part of
Brilliant.
my job.
Fantastic. Mike, welcome.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to talking to everyone.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'll just do my bit first. I'll make it as quick and painless as possible. Bit of an intro for everybody that's joining us for the first time, and those that are joining for the 10th, 12th, 20th time. Apologies, you'll have seen this before. Okay, so webinars. You can see all our current and future webinars by going to that URL. These presentations will be available after this webinar. So you can be able to find those and use the URL there. If not, just go onto the BBA website, which this should show you as I'm talking. So you just find the BBA website, you go onto the site, and at the top, there is a link to the webinars. You click on that, and on that page is our current webinars, as somebody scrolls down, and previous webinars. So the previous webinars, that will have the recording and it'll have all the slides and the presentation deck that we're going to go through today. So hugely important in case you missed something or there's something that you found of interest that you want to explore. The way to not miss any of these fantastic webinars is to subscribe to the mailing list. Again, you can do that through the URL, or you can do it if you scroll down to the bottom of the BBA website. There's a subscription button there. Okay. So why would you want to subscribe? Who are the BBA? So the BBA have been around for over 50 years. 1966, I think, was the year, a year of many firsts. What do? So they help within the construction and manufacturing industry and they help build confidence in solutions, innovations throughout the entire construction supply chain. The BBA looks to offer long-term or develop long-term partnerships, and that's for continued growth in both the UK market and globally. With what's been happening recently, the reasons are obvious, but it's massively important to remember we will always remain reassuringly impartial. Got to do that. What you might not know is that the BBA are a for-profit organisation limited by guarantee. So what does that mean? That means all profits that the BBA make are reinvested within the industry in some way, shape or form. And that's for the benefit of all stakeholders, you, me, and the wider industry and the wider community. So what do we do as a business? So we're more commonly known for our BBA agreement certification, but we also do product testing, auditing and inspection, management systems, which includes the likes of ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and the likes. And more recently, we've been offering UKCA marking and UKTA conformity. And we were the first organisation to provide a UKTA, UK technical assessment, which is pretty cool. To date, we've issued more than 6,000 certificates, and we do more than 8,000 annual inspections and assessments. There's only 170 of us, and not all of us do those inspections and assessments. So way to go, team. That's quite an achievement to do all those inspections and assessments. That's enough about the BBA. Let's get on to today's topic. And we're talking about digital and we're talking about innovation. So we'll look at the trends, why digitization plays a key role to ensure product assurances, the relationship between digitization and quality management, and I'm pretty sure Mike's got a few other tricks up his sleeve, and we'll finish with a Q&A. So before I hand over to Mike, I just want to let you know, if you've got any questions, please ask them. Hugely important that we help you out as much as we possibly can. You can ask these questions using the Q&A function on this webinar. Alternatively, you can ask them at any time, and we will try and answer them at the end. If we don't get round to answering them at the end of this webinar, we will be in contact and we will answer them for you. I promise that. Okay, promises aside, it's time for me to hand over to Mike to do his thing. I'm really interested in this one, can't wait. So Mike, I'm going to make you presenter and it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I think there must have been a mistake in your introduction. I can't believe that 50 years ago was when I was at school. It must be something quite different from that. I'm sorry. It's
Okay, we'll wash over that. We won't dwell on 1966 anymore.
1966. Yeah, I shouldn't have been born, but I can remember it far too well. So good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about digitization of construction and why innovation must come with assurances. I'm sort of going to turn the phrase a little bit on its head, but let's start off with a little bit about KTN. KTN, Innovate UK KTN is an organisation, another not-for-profit organisation, which is part of the Innovate UK family, and our role is very much working with Innovate in trying to build collaborations and building events around the innovation journey that Innovate UK are trying to build for the UK economy. So we spend a lot of time working across different areas, and we work across all sorts of specters, from agri-foods to medicine to construction, energy, etc. So we're active in all the fields that Innovate UK are. So my role is in looking after construction, and part of that is providing the Secretariat services for something called I3P, the Infrastructure Industry Innovation Partnership, which is a successor to Crossrail's Innovate 18 program, and which was just a program for innovation on the Crossrail program. And when that came to an end, when the innovation program came to an end at Crossrail, it was originally going to be just part of Tideway's innovation program, but a lot of people got together across the infrastructure industry and said, this is a really good idea, can't we make this work across industry? And I3P was born back in 2016, and I've been involved providing those Secretariat services from those early days, which takes up about half of my time. But half of my time I work with small SMEs, supporting them through the bid process, and I'm going to use a few of those as examples in my talk today. So we'll look at some of the trends in digital innovation from 1963, which is even before BBA arrived, but I just thought it was just a useful piece just to talk about where we've come in that time. And I came across this was an interesting piece about Sketchpad, which was developed by Ian Sutherland as part of an MIT program back in 1963, and there he is sort of working his AutoCAD magic on something that's probably less powerful than all of our individual phones these days. And then I came across this again, which is the first AutoCAD 1 in 1982, the year my son was born, who's 40 this year, so time flies when you're having fun, and how dated that looks now, although I can remember that kind of PC very well. To the future, are we there yet? What is the art of the possible? What is, the power that we have in our mobile phones is far more than all the computing power that we use to put a man on the moon. So we've moved a long way in that time, and construction and digitalization of construction is no different from that. So why digitalization? What plays a role to ensure product assurance? What digitalization can do in that space? And I picked an example here from a small SME that had been supported partly through the I3P, but through one of our members of I3P. Cloud Cycle are a small SME, digital SME, who have been part of HS2's Academy program, incubator program, and have a really interesting digital product which is making inroads into the way that we deal with cement. So it's a digitization of the delivery process and the process of getting the cement from batch works to site. And it looks at quality, operations, and environment. And the sort of thing it builds to is a sort of real-time insight and looking at the quality and logistics and operations of delivering the cement. It's all driven from a small sort of box of tricks that's attached to the individual mixing machines that deliver. So it gives a transparency of operation for the operators, for the batch producer, right the way through to the individual site. So it reduces the need for testing on site. It lowers cost. It gives you it's got a great acceptance by customers in the process of ensuring the quality of cement being delivered. So it has a great quality assurance. It prevents small claims through data. They have the data to prove that what's happened. You're looking at the quality of the cement mix. You can't add unauthorized water on site to keep it from going off, because that's measured and keenly recorded. So you get the quality upon delivery that you've ordered in your specification, and less reduction of loads at site, which means a huge impact in terms of waste material going back into the stream. So it avoids waste. It's got measurement of real concrete temperature for every load, real-time load volume, and blending mixtures. So you can optimize the cement. It's useful for looking at the last mile CO2 tracking, so you can get a full picture of the CO2 process in that. So it is a real interesting way that digitization in a relatively simple and small part of the delivery process can add so much useful data. And talking to Cloud Cycle before I put the slides together for this, they're really interested now in moving into a whole new sort of digital field of looking and tracking concrete in order to make the most of the product and the processes, getting it to site in the way that it should be delivered. So we look a little bit at the relationship. What's the relationship between digitization and quality management? We've seen that perhaps a little bit with the Cloud Cycle. But I'm going to use another example from a small SME. This was one of the first companies I supported when I joined KTN nearly over 6 years ago. Continuio is a really interesting company. It's partly a spin out of Imperial College. I introduced them to Imperial College nearly 7 years ago, where they've done a lot of work, and it's a really interesting 3D AI engine providing automated construction processes around quality and predictability on the site. So there's a lot of things that we think we know, but we don't really know. So only about 10% of the sites we can check the as-built quality, and this can cause all sorts of problems later on in the line. Time to market and schedule predictability is an enormous problem in terms of a modern building. That ability to get a client to take up residence and start paying rent, or pass it on to the new owner, is really important in terms of the cost profile of developing something. So here we've got an organization that can help look at the predictability, the scheduling, and how early or late the project is going to be. Maintenance cost is a huge issue with all sorts of buildings and infrastructure. How can we ensure that it's as built to the specification that we require, that then can reduce the maintenance costs that we have to pay? And if we can reproduce those, that's an enormous sum that we can look at. What is the life cycle and the digital twin? We talk a lot about digital twins, and how do we build those digital twins? I'm having difficulty saying it, but to look at what is the way that building's operating, that way that infrastructure's operating, and how we can model and change those changes that we need over time. How do we build those digital twins in the first place? And construction waste, huge problem to the construction industry. How do we reduce waste on site and the materials that we use? So here we've got a product which is really linking the BIM that has become standard in most construction projects, larger construction projects in the UK, scheduling data with on-site measurements, so a range of LiDAR scanners, 3D imaging of sites in different states, right the way from coming out of the ground, right the way to a completed building, can be monitored, and then converting that into analytics and reporting on the process of the site. So this is a little sort of dashboard, an image of their dashboard, and all these are just examples of things that we can do. These are not, I have no commercial interest in looking at these. I think these are just some examples, and here's a little sort of run through of a dashboard, how that will work, and the sorts of things that you can monitor in the process as you're going through the build, the installation quality, what's going on in that, looking at your model, looking at photographic evidence of the model to check individual details. So this is an off-site tool that you can use to check the product. And here, looking then at the point cloud to see how the building compares to the design. What's the variation between the design and the as-built structure, which is all done sort of manually. A whole range of looking at individual services, individual sites. So actually doing some measurements of the point cloud to check individual areas. Looking at different trades within the model and how they conform to the design. So again, a huge amount of detail that's coming out of that process. Scheduling, again, updating scheduling so that you can see what is the new real live handover point of that particular building. What are the key points that we need to focus on? And and that's all part of standard project management, but here you're actually assessing that with live data from the site that you've collected to assess how far the site is growing, where we've got to, how far behind, and what we need to focus on to make up that lost time. So that's just a sort of a very brief overview to the sorts of detail and the embedded data that we're gaining, and how digitization here is providing a quality and assurance on the site and the way it's going to work. And then I go on to look at what is in the future. What sorts of things can we digitize in the future in construction to make a huge difference. Hopefully many of you have heard NUAR, National Underground Asset Register, is a government-backed program to effectively map the underworld. These two pictures are typical of city streets and the amount of cables and utilities. In fact, actually, I think perhaps they're rather less congested than some holes we might see in the ground. But the data that we have behind these underground assets is pretty sparse. A lot of that data is still on paper maps with not a lot of digitalization of that process. How do we build a national asset register that will digitize all of that data into some kind of model? How do we do it at the moment before we start digging holes on site? We often go around with paint cans trying to mark on the road where exactly all the utilities are in that road before we start digging it up. Huge problem in terms of cable strikes, big issue for lots of utility companies, but even the likes of Highways England. I3P are working with Highways England on a project to try and reduce the number of asset strikes that Highways England have on building new roads and extending roads. Now, you would think there was an opportunity that they have, an asset that they have control over. Why can't they manage and know what's there? But these things take a lot of time to develop, and this is a really good example of how it might work in the future. So here, this would be a typical digital model of the underground, with all the different utilities, all the different people involved in those utilities, and what is there and exactly where it is. this kind of database is starting to be developed. There was a couple of trials for NUAR in London and in the Northeast, and there are going out to further trials to develop this into a national program of being able to record the data of everything that's on site. So then you end up with a situation where instead of looking at a mass of lines on the road that you've painted on with paint cans, here you can have a system, something like Trimble Site Vision, will actually monitor exactly where you are and give you a visual aid to showing what is in the ground, where it is, what it's running, who owns it, and all the information you might need before you start digging that hole. And that can save money, that can save lives. People are still killed through cable strikes, and a great problem it is to the whole of construction and what we do. So my question really, what I turned around now is said, perhaps instead of why must innovation come with assurances, perhaps, or does digital innovation not provide assurances? And that's me finished. I think we've got some time for some questions now.
Oh, fantastic, Mike. Thank you very much for that. Really interesting, some really good examples, really cool. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. So the first one would be, what do you see as blockers to, I suppose, an innovative approach or just digitisation in general within construction?
There's a number of different things. One of the biggest problems around digitization is this sort of sense of ownership of data. It's my data. Why should I share that with you? And perhaps almost a sort of sense of people want to make sure that they don't lose money from letting go of their data. That's a really big problem in terms of driving that forward. And I think the NUAR model is quite an interesting one, because it's something where it's not saying, right, this data is available to everybody. It's actually just making that data available to people who have a legitimate interest in knowing what's there. And you do have areas around security of data, and that's perhaps another issue that people find difficult to open up the sharing of that data if there's some sort of security issue about it. I think it's quite interesting if you look at Google Maps and go over fast lane, there is a fixed picture over the top of that rather than a live satellite image of what's going on. So there are legitimate issues around data security that need to be addressed, and something like NUAR has this ability to try and share data in a confidential way that allows people who need access to it rather than just making it general access. Okay,
so moving on from there then, this question quite topical really from your answer. Within the construction industry, do you feel that to get new products, new services, new ways of working, digitization, innovation, whatever that might be, just different ways of working, do you feel we need a collaborative approach within the entire industry across the supply chain?
So I3P is very much set up on a collaborative approach. It is about people sharing what they're doing and doing things in a collaborative way, and it really works, especially with large infrastructure projects. Many of those have they have joint ventures that are bidding for them, so they're used to working with their competitors, and they work in a very collaborative way. I think in infrastructure they're ready to do things in a collaborative way and are less worried about data sharing. Building buildings, I think that has more of a problem. People are more reluctant to, if they found a better way of building a building, they want to build the next one using that method, and don't want to share that with other people. So I think there are some commercial issues to get away with the stuff above ground. But I think large infrastructure projects are getting much better at doing that and understanding what is good to share and what you have to keep private.
Final question then. Do you think we have, in construction, we have potentially an educational gap or an educational issue with people that are coming into the industry maybe not be primed for this new tech and new ways of working, or do you feel people are, and we just need that injection of those people into the industry?
I think there is an enormous skills issue within construction. It's not the place that digital engineers end up by nature. If you're interested in digital engineering, construction is probably not a place that you're going to try and form a career. So yeah, there is a huge need for an educational piece, and you know, construction has a dirty, cold image, and people don't really, you know, the people in digital age don't want to work in that sort of way. Perhaps in some ways COVID has changed that. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of us sitting underneath the stairs doing things into a very wide world, and understanding that no, actually I haven't got to sit in my wellies getting cold on a building site. And there's also a lot of change, I think, in things like the way we're going to start using semi-autonomous and autonomous plant. So there's a lot of opportunities now for people to drive diggers on site where they're not sitting in the cab. They're actually going to sit in a porter cabin next door to the cab and drive the diggers from that porter cabin, because it takes them out of the danger, but it also improves productivity, because generally people driving diggers spend half their time sitting there waiting for somebody to do something down the hole, whereas you can get, you know, 5 diggers driven by 3 people, probably, that sort of thing. And so yeah, I think there's a lot, there is change that's coming. It's been a long time to come in the construction industry.
Okay, Mike, I think that's a really good place to end the conversation there. Thank you so much for your time. Really interesting. I can't wait to see what the next few years bring. Hopefully, we'll have you back in the next few years to talk about
when I can remember 60 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll bring you back after another 60 and see where we are then. But having said that, we'll all be talking in emojis then, so there won't be any audio. It'll just be visual emojis. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. Absolute pleasure. To everybody on the call, really appreciate you joining us. We've got our next webinars in 2 weeks, and then after that we've got 4 on the trot. Tuesday, 11 a.m. Check the website out, BBA website. Go on the webinar link and sign up for the webinars that you find most interesting, if not all of them. So once again, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us, and once again, Mike, thank you for joining us.